or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. And welcome to Defining Your Perfect Pipeline Like a Pro with Jeff Sibbach and Phil Sexton from the Sibbach team. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm Anna with CINC, and I'm happy to welcome all of you top performing leaders and allow me to introduce our hosts, the leaders of the Sibbach team, Jeff Sibbach and Phil Sexton.
And we're off. Well, we appreciate you giving us the opportunity to be here today and to chat with you a little bit about how we use our pipelines to help track all the leads in the system that turn into clients.
What you're saying is we actually use the system, and this is actually what we do, not just a presentation to them. Correct. To talk about it. This is how we manage our business.
Yeah, not theory. This is actually how we train our agents and how we look at the database. So we've got a couple of screenshots that we're going to share with you today. We've got our defining the CINC pipelines document that we're going to share with you, among some other stuff. But first, let's start with a little bit about who we are. Jeff, maybe you want me to run the numbers?
Yeah, I think you can run the numbers.
All right, awesome. So just to give you guys a heads up or an idea, the Sibbach team, we're based out of Arizona, Scottsdale, Arizona. We have currently 25 team members that are here with us. Last year, 2018, our closed volume was $223 million worth of residential real estate. And our CINC current, the amount of contacts that we have currently in CINC is 27,045. And then if we exclude the agent-owned leads, which we let our agents put their own leads into the system as well, then we're looking at 23,865 as of this morning. So that is just a lot of data that we like to, that we had to put some structure in place in order to manage that many contacts. But before we get into how we manage that, which is what today's webinar is about, first let's talk a little bit about, I mean, we're going to talk about pipelines, we're going to talk about labels, but first let's talk about our philosophy.
Right, so what it was is that before I got into real estate, fortunately I used to sell CRM. So I just like to go through, because I think it's good to understand the background of where this comes from. Because as a team lead, there's a few keys to CRM, and that's we do it for database marketing, we do it for lead generation, and most importantly, do it for tracking. And these are the critical components of what I think that make up, why the use of CRM is so important. But it's kind of based on the idea that there's a gentleman out there by the name of Peter Drucker, and he's often quoted saying that you can't manage what you can't measure. And what we're going to review today is tracking your pipeline, right? This is the part of when the leads already have gotten into the system, because that's one effort in itself. And whether you're bringing in leads in from, if CINC's managing Google pay-per-click for you, or you're bringing in Zillow leads, or off of a database mailer, however, these are leads that are in
the open
system.
house app, right? However, those leads are entered into the system,
right? But we're going to stay hyper-focused today, and this webinar is going to discuss one of the most critical components of tracking your leads, and that's defining your perfect pipeline like a pro.
Well, that's easy for you to
say.
It's
not easy for me. Yeah, I thought we were going to.
Perfect pipeline like a pro.
Yeah, we're going to get away from the riddles, but okay, good deal. So the things that we're trying to track here are accountability for our salespeople. That, whether it's inside sales or it's outside sales or just a general realtor out there, but providing some accountability for those leads that you're paying a lot of money to generate, right? Because marketing dollars are expensive, and we want to make sure that we are holding our salespeople accountable. Second, just process for the salespeople. We want to be able to provide them what I think is a simple and easy process so that we can all be on the same page, because we're going to talk about training, which we do at the classroom level, and then secondly, what we do in the individual level, what we call the sync ups. The third piece of this is the documentation. And because it's a lot easier to discuss when you're in those one-on-one meetings with agents where the leads at, where you can find opportunities to train, because it's documented in the system. It's also good for, the documentation is good for planning how much sales are going to be coming in, meaning as you have appointments and as you have them move down the pipeline, you could see how much future business and whether your leads are working out or not for a particular lead source. And lastly, it's the business process, meaning that at the end of the day, the CRM is how you drive your business process, right? So you can run the business how you want, but how it relies on the different agents out in the field. Okay, so now, because we're talking about pipeline, we're talking about the success of your lead conversion, and therefore pipeline management relies on the quality of data. And what we mean here is and why this is so important to keep it simple, because we want to control the amount of garbage that can get into your system. And that why Phil and our team has created these, what do you call it, categories?
The pipelines, the labels.
The labels, right?
The organizational pieces that we need.
Right, so therefore you can run the reporting and then you can have good data and not bad data. Now ultimately, to get good data though, it relies on how easy it is for the agents to use the app on the phone, right? So, and then also how it can share with the desktop version, but ultimately, because you're gonna put in high quality leads, but you have to remember that the average age of a realtor is about 55 still, and more women than men, and that I guess in running a team, I realized that a lot of the agents that come to us aren't used to using CRM, and that's how they ended up being a teammate, a part of a team, because they were unable to track the data themselves. So that does put a little more of a challenge on the usage side of it, is because they come to you not having used it as much in the past. Now, today, we're going to be talking about something that we've developed over time, meaning that we've been using CRM for about 5 or 6 years now, and this is the evolution of pipeline management. But know that your agents, the typical agent is going to have some kind of formal education, but have not had a history of recording data electronically. And what this pipeline manager system that we're going to talk about you today helps you simplify instead of leaving it too ambiguous to them, right? Like, so it lays out simple rules. Because we know that agents are agents and team members are they typically have been unable to build their own and maintain their own database, so they may still fail to log in, as we kind of teach you different tips and tricks to
keep them engaged.
Keep them engaged, yes. Right? And don't worry, not all will always follow all the rules, but as you put in the time and you do the training and you put quality leads in for them, it will slowly, and we feel the building of momentum in our business as we attract more and more agents into the app, into the computer. And it's why we've added, because as we teach our agents CINC we do a weekly meeting on Tuesdays. Phil usually brings it up almost every week.
Well, now, yeah, we have, since we started with CRMs, we've gone, I don't know, from Moresolds was one that we used, Infusionsoft, Boomtown, and now that we're on CINC, we have really, it becomes teamwork where we have to work together. Our staff and our agents work together to make sure that the data that we have is accurate, because we have to make business decisions based on this data. And I never liked, a lot of times with other systems, we would track a lot more stuff outside of the system. And I never really liked that, because
You're saying Google Sheets or Excel sheets,
yes. And we still have some pieces of that where we have to extrapolate the data out of CINC to keep it so that we have ongoing tallies of how many leads are in each pipeline phase, for example, at each different week. But most of the CINC updates that we have is what we share into the team meeting, just like a reminder on the note that we add when we get to the appointment set stage, or the notes that we add when we get to the closed stage. And we're going to share all of those with you. I even have a document that we'll bring up on the screen here in a little bit to talk about that.
My point with the touch base is that we have a weekly meeting to talk to them, and then we have individual touch bases that we call sync up meetings, and that's where the training is delivered. First it's delivered.
I'm really proud of the name Sync Ups.
Yeah,
we've got a lot of Sync Ups.
Yeah, right. Phil is the Sync Up king. He does our Sync Up training with each of our agents, and I'm just talking about the success that the Sync Up has brought, and that because we talk about it in a weekly meeting, and then as you do the individual training, and then as you go in and manage each individual pipeline, it just gives you a common theme to talk to them. And it does help to have each of these items laid out specifically. You don't have to do it exactly like we do, but something similar. So just a few other management things, like you may have to help the agents download the app. You may have to help them, like we even have included into our interview process, making sure that we're only bringing on agents that do have a smartphone and are used to using it. I mean, you may still have to get them when they download the app to move it onto the first screen, so that to make it easy again, because like everything we're doing is to simplify the ease, because we're after the data, right? This is the data for our prospects and our future clients. So it's really important and very critical that we make it as easy for them to get the data to us, and get them comfortable with receiving communication through their smartphone,
through their CINC app.
Through their app, yeah. That it does mean that you have to do some dedicated training and accountability for this to grow your usage and acceptance. I was just trying to make that point, right?
To get their buy-in.
Right.
That's the thing. I mean, it takes a couple of weeks. It takes a couple of meetings for us to meet with agents over and over again. And we have this series of classes where we want to start to make sure that they have their CINC number, right? Like, let's just get a couple of things. This class is not about setting up your CINC platform, but some of the basics that we go over is that CINC number. We make sure they've got the mobile app, their email signature, the behavioral messaging turned on. And once we get past those checkpoints, then we get more into the education and the dedicated time working in the system. And so we call them sync up meetings. And I have a meeting we've got, like I said, 25 agents on the team currently. And so every week, I like to meet with the agents every other week. So that gives me 12 to 13 hour-long meetings with our agents week after week, because this data is as important as it is. And we're gonna evolve into doing more group meetings, but right now as we're getting this thing running the way that we need it to, and the amount of attention that we're giving it, we just feel that we need to give our agents the most amount of attention right now in the beginning.
But so one thing to share with you though is that a lot of our team members have been on CRM with us for a long time. And then early on, they might have to do weekly trainings, right, to get people going on a new system, meaning that the newer agents do require more attention early to make sure, because what we learned is as we get them successfully going.
Yeah, and our definitions change and your definitions will change. And we are very aware that I don't like making changes in our system. I want our rules to be our rules to be our rules. And right now, the rules that we currently have in place, our agents are giving us feedback that this is the best we've ever had it set up. It's very logical.
That's why we're teaching here today, because we're really proud of what we have, and we're about to get
it's
started.
Measurable. And so that's what we're gonna let's kind of dive into it. So I've got a couple of notes here that first of all, we use pipelines. So the pipelines in CINC, when we first got it up, let me just pull up CINC on my computer so that you guys hopefully can follow along on yours. Pull up your CINC app and then go into the leads section, because I want to open up pipelines and we're going to review those. Let me see if I can get this webinar thing out of the way. And I'm not going to show my dashboard just because this is our real leads and our real business, and I'm all of their contact information and everything will show up. So instead, if you could follow along, if you go into your CINC dashboard and you click on leads, there's some default pipelines there. And we had, when we first got this thing going, we had a lot of thought and talk around what we should update those pipelines to be, something other than what the CINC defaults came with. And at the end of the day, we decided to stick with the ones that they have, and because we've modified systems before. And when you start modifying systems and you get too deep into customizing everything, then as updates happen or as changes happen or as CINC continues to improve their platform based on the default way that they have it set up, and if we start to modify too much and change names and change words, I just know that that could confuse us in the future. And so we just went with the ones that they use. And honestly,
meaning as much out of the box as possible, because all of their internal processes are tied to those items, and it just, the alerts and everything, it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, so let's go into, I'm going to share with you what we call our CINC pipelines defined sheet. And so let me click this button that says show screen. and see if you guys can see the screen with me. I think that works. I'm gonna turn us off. Oh, thanks, Anna. Nice. So sync pipelines defined. This is a sheet that we have on our company intranet so that our clients, so that our agents can all go off of the same version, right? I can zoom in a little bit maybe to make that bigger.
Meaning we like to make this a public document for anybody at any time so that they can read it, because you are going to explain it to them and they're still going to have questions because they're going to go out in the world. And I mean, you know, as you're trying to get them to use the app every single day, they're going to need a place to reference it back. It's okay if you copy ours. I think we could maybe even share this with everybody.
Yeah. All right, so no stage set. I expect 0 people to be in there. New leads, I expect 0 people to be in there because we have contact immediately is one of our rules. That means that as soon as a new lead is in the system, it needs to get attempted. It needs to have us reach out to them. And when we reach out to somebody, it's either successful and we move them to contacted, or it's not successful and we move them to attempt to contact.
So Phil, could you define the timeline, which immediately, that's a big word. What does immediate mean as far as timeline for them?
So in the morning, we have leads that come in overnight. So when our client concierge, Daryl, gets in the morning, that means that before that first hour, I mean, especially Monday is the hardest because just a lot of leads that come in over the weekend that might not have gotten auto assigned and need to get assigned. And so in that process, unfortunately, I'm not proud, but that first 30 minutes, that's like the priority of when he comes in. We need to make sure any leads that didn't get assigned to agents automatically get assigned as soon as he comes in the morning. And then when he's working leads during the day, he's got to make sure that a lead comes in and they get a call. I mean, our goal is within 60 seconds. I know the industry says you got to call them within 5 minutes, but if we say within 5 minutes, then that started to look like 10 minutes or 15 or half an hour. So immediate means within the first 60 seconds is what we shoot.
Really realizing that there's a delay often before the lead even gets into the system. So at 60 seconds, really, that's probably even already 2 minutes or 3 minutes. So.
Right, but I like it when the leads respond or pick up the phone and say, wow, that was fast. That means that we're doing a good job, that we're doing it, that we're getting to them in time. But so the next pipeline is called attempted contact, and you can see our definitions here. Leads that have been reached out to via text, email, phone, but we did not get in touch with them, buyers or sellers, or even tenants for that matter. We actually use a label called renter for the tenant leads. Next,
a little more color. Is it so that they can reach out by text, they can reach out by phone call or email in that stage?
Yes, exactly. Those are the attempted contacts, as we're reaching out by all 3 of those. And of course, we use sync to click the button to send a text in sync, to click the button and send an email in sync, or if they're using their mobile app, to click the call button on their phone and call their leads. That saves them time. It makes them more efficient because then they don't have to go back in and relog whatever that email, text, or phone call was. They still have to add a note on what was discussed in the event that they got in touch with them, but it saves a step and it at least shows that there's a contact that was made.
But we see a lot of use of them entering that note there, and that is very good because they usually often use voice to text to add that note, and sometimes we get a lot of extra information.
True. So then next stage is contacted, and this is, I mean, it's kind of I have a smile on my face when I read this one because it's actual connection. It's not that you see inside of Sync that they opened the email. It's not that we had Jeff Sibbach register and his voicemail says, hi, you've reached Jeff Sibbach. Those don't count, even though that's confirmation that their contact information is accurate. I don't believe that is contacted, and especially if they pick up and hang up and you don't have a chance to talk to them, that doesn't count as a contacted lead. Leave that one in attempted contact. And so when you have a contact with the lead, we move them there. In the event that you schedule an appointment, it's funny because when I sit down with agents and I show them, typically attempted contacted is the biggest bucket for most of our agents. That's where the most amount of leads live, in contacted. And
so let's use a big example. So let's say they have 75 leads. How many would be in the?
You're going to see 34 in attempted contact. No, you're going to see 26 in attempted contact, 34 in contacted, maybe 5 in appointment set, 3 under contract, 2 closed, right? Like depending on the time frames that we're talking about.
And a partridge in a pear tree?
Yeah, exactly. I don't even know if that math adds up.
Okay.
But contacted is the biggest bucket typically for our agents. And so then from a coaching standpoint, from a training standpoint, I can see the data that if our agents meet with the people, meaning that they have a real estate appointment with those people, with those leads, then typically those are the ones that make it out the other end as a client. And so then we put a lot of training into the different reasons why appointments could happen. And I know that this isn't about, that's not what this webinar is about, but really starting to visualize where the numbers are in the pipeline helps you understand what your agents or what yourself needs help with, needs the most assistance with. So appointment set is where we move them next, right? And that is when you had a real estate appointment with them. And so another clarification point here is, let's just say it's an open house lead, for example. When an open house visitor walks in, they get the contact information for that lead and they put them in the system. We require open house leads to be put as attempted contact because you didn't have confirmation that that contact information they gave you was correct. Now, if you reach out to them with a video and you say, hey, thanks again for stopping by, it was really nice to meet you, and the person responds, then you can move them into contacted. But again, you didn't have an official appointment with them, so I don't let open house leads jump into the appointment set just because they've met with the people.
Because it will screw up your data.
Yeah, it's not accurate, right? You've got to have a real you have to have a scheduled appointment set with a lead that's a real estate appointment for that to be moved into the appointment set category.
I think it's something to said that we do generate a lot of open house traffic where we can have 8 sets or 10 sets or 12 sets or 15 sets through an open house. And when that happens, it can screw up somebody's pipeline because those are not all high quality leads in our opinion until we confirm that they gave us the correct contact information and we talk to them post the visit.
Right. And so we're going to get into labels on how we keep those contacted leads and attempted contacted leads a little bit more organized, but I want to get through the rundown here of the pipelines first. And so appointments that had a real estate appointment, one of the things that we require for our agents is that this is when they also have to use the system to schedule an appointment inside of CINC. So if you're moving somebody to appointment set, that means that you also need to schedule the appointment. So I've got an example of what the appointment set looks like. So that's when you pull in this example. I'm sorry, you go into the appointment tab and you click new appointment and you fill in the information here. And for a couple of reasons. One, CINC then sends an email confirmation of the appointment to that lead, which is a great touch on process, right? People, leads, clients appreciate businesses that run on a process. And when you have a reach out like that that looks professional, it's all branded the way that the CINC emails are branded, they just appreciate that. And that's one of the things that we've gotten
feedback. It's scary though at first for the agents. It's something that we have done in our business for a long time in sending confirmation from the appointment, and that we've recently fully integrated. One of the reasons why we're so excited to be with CINC is because we want that communication to go out to that, because that seller appreciates that more than we ever thought they would.
And one of the things that we tell our agents is just be on notice that whatever you type in here is the reason for the meeting, they're going to see it. And that is the biggest, boldest language that you want to have with your agents or with yourself when you're learning the system, is because I've got agents that put notes like, she goes by, like her son is the one meeting us at the appointment, or like notes to themselves about the appointment.
Yes.
They're obviously not aware that that's going to go into the email reminder that goes to the client. So just be aware that these appointments get emailed to the client, which is a good thing. Use it and accordingly. All right, so let's go back to pipelines defined. Next, so that appointment either went great and you're going to work with them, or it didn't. If it didn't go great, then you leave that lead in appointment set. You obviously update your notes in the system on why what's happening next. But if it did go great and now you're working with them, that's when we move them to showing. And so
whether it's a buyer or a seller, we move them to showing.
Yes, and showing in our world, you can see on the sheet here, is for actively working with the client. Buyers, that means that you're previewing homes, you're showing homes to clients, or for sellers, this is where we have all of our active listings actually. I don't use under contract.
Because we're showing the house.
Yes, but we also, if we're preparing to go to market, we still leave them here because we're actively working with the client. Our stagers are going over there. We're prepping the home. We're taking the photos. They stay in showing. And that was one of our, how are we going to use these labels, these pipelines that come by default? We're just going to put our definitions to them, and now our team is all on the same page with this is how.
It was just we needed a category of success showing success from the appointment set, knowing that those are all the people that, because we don't win every single appointment, and we need to know who the one are we continuing to work and are starting to lead into the contracted agreement.
Yeah, well, pipelines show us as team managers the skill sets of our agents, the closing ratios of our agents. Like I can see now how many leads make it to appointment set and how many come out the other end is closed. And I'm telling you, they're actually good at that. Like that is not the hard part. For a lot of our agents, they can, when they meet with somebody, they're able to get them out the other end very well. The hard part for most is actually getting them to meet with them in person at that appointment. But when we can make that first appointment happen, we know we've got a much greater chance of coming out the other end.
But I mean, as a business manager, you want to be able to see, because sometimes newer agents or agents that are struggling, they can have appointments, but then nothing go to show in category. And then you start to build a ratio of, okay, what is an acceptable level of appointment to showing versus the field for each individual agent and average for the team.
Yeah, and it's funny, in our world with our team, the way that we're kind of split up in our duties and our responsibilities for our team members is that I take from generating the lead to scheduling the appointment, and Jeff takes from being at the appointment to getting them to close. And so I'm that front half and Jeff is that back half. And so if they are stuck, they got a lot of leads that are in appointment set and they're not moving them to showing, that's when Jeff comes in to coach them on what they're saying in their listing appointments, what they're saying in their buyer consultations, how they're actually hunting down and finding the houses. And so again, the pipelines are what set the stage with how we can customize our training to help the agents.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a valuable tool in helping to manage the pipeline and the progress of each of the agents with the money we've invested in the leads and in the CRM system.
So one of the notes that I have here underneath sellers on showing is that we have in our process, after an agent goes on a listing appointment with one of our leads, there's 7 questions that they need to email to or that they need to get to our listings manager. We use CINC as that communication tool. And so after an agent goes on a listing appointment, after we see that they've got an appointment scheduled inside of CINC, the agent attends that appointment, there's then 7 questions that they need to email, that they post as a note inside of CINC, and they click notify listings manager. His name is Adam, so they notify Adam in our world, and now Adam gets a ping that information is there. And the reason why me as an operations manager loves it is because it's not an email that's invisible to everybody. It's inside of the system and it's documented, and now the entire team can be on the same page with what's happening.
And questions like, is the square footage accurate? Are they ready to move forward? What is their anticipated list date going to be? Does the stager need to go out? Like just questions like that we know that are the same questions all the time, but it's a great way to ping them in through the system and get that recorded.
Yes, and so then after those clients actually open escrow, that's where you move them into under contract. The under contract pipeline stage in our world is for open escrows, period. It doesn't mean that we have a signed listing agreement with somebody. That's not what it is. Even though those people are technically under contract, this is for escrows.
And I think this is going back to the thing we said up front is simplicity and ease, is that too many statuses just gets challenging. Like we want to be as accurate as possible, but still we thought, because it's 7, right, Phil? 7 different pipelines. We didn't want it to be 13 or 14 or 15. We realized that we had a limit of what we could get good data on. So it's just easier when it's 7 categories versus more.
Yes, and similarly to the previous 2 appointment set where they have CINC requirements, showing where they have CINC requirements, under contract they have CINC requirements as well. And that's when that goes under contract, then the agent is required to add a note with the details of that transaction. And it's super simple, it's wonderful. Let's see if I have an example of this note is now in the system for everybody to see, right? It gets notified to our transaction coordinator, and so now everybody is on the same page. Obviously, details can adjust during an escrow period, but at least we're all starting on the same page with a note like this. So it's just one of those things that's a reminder for our agents to do. All right, oh, wrong button. Let me go back to pipelines defined. All right, so under contract, and then obviously then it moves, then after under contract, it closes. If it falls out, The furthest back that lead could go is appointment set, because they've had an appointment with that lead. It could go to showing, right? Like if a lead falls out and you're still working with them to find another house or whatnot, you just put it back to showing. Or if it's your listing and it falls out, you just put it back to showing. But it never would go back to contacted, because that is still somebody that we've met with. And we want to make sure that we're keeping track of how far, of how many people got how far in the pipeline. And along these same lines is we used to let agents throw leads back to the pond, where get these out of my name, get these out of my name. And I don't do that anymore, because then I have bad data and I can't see how many opportunities we gave to somebody and what came out of those opportunities. And so we have archive tags that we use, and we've got systems set up where they can reassign a lead to another agent, but you can't just throw them into the ignore pile. If it's really an ignore lead, then let's just use the archive tag, or I call them tags because we came from the Boomtown world, but
hopefully we caught it at the ISA level. Therefore, we know that we're giving pretty good leads past that level.
Yep. So, all right. Next, into sold. When you put them into sold, always add a past client label. And so we've got a label. It's under the group called lead categories in our system. And that label is called past clients. And the reason why we use that label is because, I don't know, maybe you guys can help. Like, I hope to learn from you as well. As the CINC users watch this webinar, if you guys have systems set up a little bit differently, or you have better ideas on how we use this data, feel free to reach out to us. We're findable, Jeff@Sibbach.com, Phil@Sibbach.com. But we use the past client label because I have no other way to track who our past clients are in the system. Because what happens is if they have more than one transaction, they then repeat those pipeline stages. And so I can't use sold for all past clients, because when our past client wants to buy another house, then they go back into appointment set. And so we have to add that label past client. And then there's a couple of things that we require that our agents to do. One of them is to update the mailing address.
But I think this is one of the most important, and why you have it bolded yellow for this, and because it's always add a past client label, because
we're database marketers.
Right.
We got to know who our past clients are in that database. We got to be able to find our past clients in that database. We got to be able to mail our past clients in that database. And so super important in our world. And then what's happened as we've been partnered for now 7 years in the Sibbach team. And when I look at the data from when we closed a transaction, let's just call it 6 years ago in 2013.
In more sold?
In previous, which has been, iterations of exports and imports into new systems down the road. It's hard for me to look at a past client and know where, how, when, what that past client did. What was the transaction?
Like, were they a buyer? Were they a seller? Did they even rent the place? What date was it? Who was the agent?
Yes, like who did they work with on our team? Is that person even on our team anymore? Like, we don't know. And so one of the things that we've required is that now when you put a deal, when you close a deal, you've got to add a sticky general note called ASAPD. ASAPD is our acronym for agent name, side, address, price, and date. Because now right there, when you open it up, it's at the top and it gives very clear on what this client transacted.
And it really helps with lead routing too, when a past client comes in and trying to figure out who that is. That helps speed up, because that sticky note is really about to speed the lead.
Yes, yes. And then on the buyer side, we send anniversary cards. Part of our past client, part of our touch points for our database is that we send anniversary cards on COE dates. So we created a custom field in CINC, which I'm sure you guys are familiar. On the info tab down at the bottom, we've got a few custom fields, birthdays, etc. But COE of buy side is one of our fields. So for the buyers, we ask that our agents go in there and put the COE date down there as well. That way, when we export the data on a monthly basis, we can sort it by that COE date, and those are the people that we're getting cards ready for on a monthly basis.
Ooh, I would think we're gonna have to review those. Let's just make sure we got all 7 more,
Yeah, is it 7? I haven't counted. I don't count new stage set. I don't really count new leads. So
still categories.
Yeah, still categories. Still pipeline stages.
Right.
So attempted contacted, when you haven't gotten confirmation from them, they didn't pick up the phone, you haven't heard back from them. Contacted, once you've actually had a communication, whether it's text, email, or phone. Appointment set is that you have a real estate appointment scheduled. Next is showings, and those are the people that you're actively working with. And then under contract means that escrow has been opened, and then when they close, make sure you get the data on that closing inside of CINC at that time, because I tell you what happens, 30, 60 days later, it's like,
Who? It's why we have CRM, so we don't ask who.
Yes.
Where are all the owls?
All right, so let me just pull this up here, and I'm going to pause my screen.
So
right there.
as we are in love with the 7 different pipeline stages, there's still no definition of time, meaning because there needs to be an alert for every agent in understanding what are their hottest leads and what ones are not, especially for our senior agents that may have 100 leads or 150 leads. When they come into their system, understanding on a daily basis who is the most important people that we should be talking to, because that bucket, that contact data or that showing bucket could fill up, but we needed another way to identify urgency in their pipeline. So when they get a little bit of free time, this is just to unequivocally point out that this person is someone I should be talking to on a weekly basis.
All right. So with that said, you guys can see on the screen in front of you that we've got A7, B30, C90, and D archive. And before I get into those, let me first
The labels.
The labels.
Yeah.
Before I get into those labels, let me first comment on reminders, because I am a huge, huge fan of reminders. I love the idea that when you are interacting with one individual lead, you can set yourself a reminder for a future date. And in that reminder, you can write out your script of what you want to say when you call them back in a week or in a month or in 90 days, because you're thinking about that person right then. And so the more specific you make your reminders.
Right. In theory, sounds like the perfect thing ever.
And my engineer mind thinks that it still thinks, not even in theory,
Okay.
It is the perfect thing ever.
Yeah.
But what happens is when you have a combination of unimportant reminders, automated reminders, manually added reminders, is inevitably, I've seen this now over
Even on top of all my own, go do the laundry and pick up the groceries and the kids and then do all the other reminders, and we're in reminder hell.
It gets to be more past due reminders. Every time we move to a new CRM where we have reminder functionality, the past due reminders grows to a point where
Yes.
they get ignored. And some agents can use them, but when I look at the team as a whole, I'm no longer, yes, we train on how to use reminders, but I'm not particular about it.
And if we're looking for someone to blame for this becoming unimportant, meaning I sold CRM in the past and reminders were quite helpful until the invention of the smartphone and social media. It has ruined them reminders, because now you're getting pings and dings and like it's just like all of a sudden you're at a casino. Yeah. And it's like shut it all off, right? like so. But how else then can I find out who I got to call today? Great. Labels.
Great.
Yes.
And so in the past we had A, B, C, D labels defined as A, or you're ready to buy now people, but that wasn't measurable, because what would happen when we had definitions like ready to buy as soon as you find the house is that now agents have their own interpretation of who that is or what that means, whether that person's in town or not, and it wasn't measurable. And what did you start with Peter Drucker's comment?
What you don't track, you can't measure.
What you don't track, you can't measure. But with this one, I have to be able to measure it. And so what we went to is A7. And what I mean by A7 is those are the people, I don't know if you can see it, hopefully it's not too small on the screen here, but I am looking at the label A7. And now if I go over to my last touch column and I sort by the last touch, everybody with this A7 label should be no greater than 7 days on the last touch. And from an agent standpoint, this is one that they love. If it's B30, same concept, as I go and I sort by my last touch, and nobody should be greater than,
because organically in the system you can see when the last touch happened versus what that category is, and it's just an instant reminder. And this is why using the system for its beauty is because it's mirrored up with what's already in sync and tells them you were supposed to contact, you told us you wanted to contact me within 7 days, and it's now been 8 days
or 30 days. Like it still happens. But if you get, I mean, when I sit down with agents every 2 weeks and we look at their data, and I'm telling you, I've never seen agents actually have as good of results as they have now. When I pull up their B30s, those numbers are typically under 30. When I pull up C90s, those typically are under 90. De-archive in our world, let me go back to that pipeline defined. De-archive in our world is mass communication only. Like, I don't expect, those are the people that agents are not going to reach out to. I'm cool with that. I know that those leads exist, but they're still going to get the mass communication that we do for listings, for searches, for market updates, things like that.
It's also very visible to see, take a look in their pipeline in why don't they have so many A's, right? Like, why are, like, I mean, if you sit 3 open houses a month and you're getting, you know, 7 to 15 leads from us a month, and you only have 4 in there, then maybe you're not chasing those leads hard enough to get to the in 7 because you're not contacting enough of them to identify, or, you know, they just, it allows for at a management level to see where the, again, because of our 7 pipeline stages, and now we have within those pipeline stages, there's still how many days,
a grade of how long you will let go by without reaching back out to that lead. And so when we got started with that, I thought it was only going to apply to the people who were in contacted. And what I found is that it applies to the people that are in showing, it applies to the people who are in appointment set, it applies to them all. And so really, when a new lead comes into the system, A7 is almost the default. It's not, but it could be a default where, you know, that agent has to, you know, you have to reach out to that person within a week. After your first touch, you've got to reach back into them. You've got to reach back out to them quickly, because you're setting the stage on conversion and on why you're the right one to work with.
And for those of you that may not be working in, we are in a 50-50 state, meaning half of our business comes from out of state into state. And in a highly retirement communities, or if you live by a lake or your winter home or your summer home area, you have people that consider or could be in your pipeline for 3 or 4 years, right? Because they made the first year they came down and they had an appointment, but they rent. So they may not buy it. And then they go home. And then George finds out that he's not going to retire this year, so they still want to live here, but then he gets his retirement for 3 years later. So it's still, we're going to keep him, you know, we only may need to, even though George is a great lead, we may only need to contact with George every 3 months, even though he's in the showing stage. Because we're here in Phoenix, like, you know, we're in the summertime, we may not see that lead for 90 days, just knowing that it could, the challenge with this is because it's still a very good lead. It's just not right now.
Right. So as we're gonna wrap up, I got a few more notes for you on rules on how we use the system and where, which I'll share with you in a second. But when you use these pipelines correctly, and when you use these labels of grades with timeframes correctly, you then set a order of operation for your agent when they come into the system. You're helping them prioritize where they look first. Because when an agent says to me, oh, when I log into the system, when I log in, I see all these garbage leads. I don't want them. Just throw those back to the pond. My response to them is, if you're asking to throw leads back to the pond, you don't know how to use CRM, because you should never look at all leads in your name as one grouping. That's not how CRM is designed. So why don't you start with under contract? Look at the leads that are under contract. Is there any action items that need to happen? Then go down to the showings. Where are you with your last touch points on the showings, meaning the leads that you're working with? Then let's look at the appointment set leads. Do you have any upcoming appointments that you need to be prepared for, or anybody that you had appointments for recently that you need to reach back out to? And then go to your A7s, your B30s, your D90, your C90s.
What if they have leads that are in none of those?
So then my other, like I don't know, wild card, you have leads that aren't in those. And you have people that don't have their leads set up in that yet. And so my wild card, if you will, is when you go into all of your leads and you sort by last login. I think
of the agents to see when they logged in last?
No,
okay.
Not of the agents.
Last login of the leads.
Last time the lead logged into the system.
Because you're looking to see if they have all their people set up on auto searches, meaning that the email, the system's emailing them homes.
Look, here's what I mean. I hope you guys can see this, but I can sort by last login. And then what I do is I look at the difference between the time frame in last login and the time frame under last touch. And you can see 2 minutes ago, this top lead was on the site, and 4 days ago was the last touch. 12 minutes, no touch has been recorded. 18 minutes, 8 days, 21 minutes, 35 days. Like, to me.
So when you see that the lead's logging in 18 minutes ago, but it's been 8 days since your
last touch. Then I'm going to look at my label. Do I have this as a B30 or do I have, I'm sorry, yeah, as a B30, as a C90, then I'm okay. I might not need to reach out. But when I get down to the Sal lead, that 35 days is the last touch and 21 minutes ago he was on the site, there's somebody
opportunity exists, right?
Yes.
Also when he's already, because now you can see that the person gave us correct contact information. We set up on a search. We're sending them homes. They're clicking on homes and they're logging back in. Like, that's a pretty good lead as far as in the,
And it's current. They're going to know your name when you call. That's why I like those, because when you call those leads and you say, hey, it's Phil with the Sibbach team at eXp Realty.
Because they just logged in and saw your name.
They don't say, who? Right, they know who you are. All right, so back to my sheet.
They do say, I'm not looking, and
they still lie. No question. All right, so let me stop the webcam so that this gets bigger on your screen. And now I have additional rules, and just to, you guys can read them, but just so that we're all on the same page.
Words of wisdom before we part.
I tell you, you'll never. It's funny. It obviously these all come from a level of experience where I have these leads that are unsold, and I'm like, man, I don't have any escrow files. I can't find anything about that lead, and the agent will say, well, that's because they bought with somebody else.
Oh, you lost.
Right. So our first rule is these pipeline stages are leads that are in current relationship with the Sibbach team. If they're listed or under contract with some other agent, you laugh.
Yes.
This is true. This happened.
Last year we closed almost 60 million internet leads, and it's just funny that we
have to publish these rules. If they close more than one transaction with us, they go through the pipelines again. We already mentioned that. This one is the one that comes up the most, and that's if they're in 2 transactions. The furthest stage of the process takes precedent. So I've got a listing, they're active, and they go under contract. They open escrow on the buy side. In our world, that pipeline is under contract. It's the furthest transaction that takes precedent.
Because we know to turn off our marketing and different approaches, because once they're under contract, that's a serious relationship. You got a ring on their finger.
Yes, I don't want to treat them. Let's just take it back and if I'm meeting with them about anyway, I don't want to get into that. But once that buy side closes, then they only have one transaction with us. They wouldn't go to sold. They would go back to wherever that listing is in the process. If that listing is now in escrow, then it would stay.
But they'd have a past client tag.
Absolutely.
Because they became a client.
Past client tag, a sticky note.
Now I'm starting to get it, Phil. Good. All right, cool.
And then also, just so you guys are aware, I hate that you can have multiple sticky notes at the top. That's one of the things that just personally I don't like when it says 4 more sticky notes.
You mean like most of the computers in our office?
No, that's funny. Not those sticky notes.
Oh.
I mean the CINC sticky notes. If it's really important enough to be a sticky note, then I would just edit the existing sticky note and put whatever that level of information is in that existing one. And so when they have multiple transactions, I don't have multiple sticky notes. We've got one sticky note with all of the different deals that they've had at the top.
But know that your agents, if they find out that they can create a sticky note, will want to put multiple sticky notes just because they're agents.
It just happens.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
2 pipelines so that we know how effective our agents are in the process, and so that we can communicate internally with leads, and we don't. That's a technical term, so we don't F up a deal. EFF. I think that's French. All pipeline stages are used for both buyers and sellers, and moving pipelines is the responsibility of the agent. But I'll tell you what, it's teamwork. I move pipelines as much as agents move pipelines. It's just
always a chance to help and coach.
Yes. One more note on that point is the sync up meetings that we have. Half of that time is spent coaching. The other half of that time is actually working in the database, because if you give agents too much homework in those meetings, then they come back and they all start with the same words. I've shared with you what those words are, but the words are this: I haven't been in the system much since the last time we met.
Huh?
That's okay. That's what everybody says. Let's just move on. And what that means is I didn't do the homework that we talked about. So what I have found is
you're saying as a different definition than you think that it has?
Look, we've got to get in those sync meetings, we open it up and we look at that. And here's the challenges. Your agents that are closing a lot of deals probably update the system less than your agents that aren't closing a lot of deals. And so there is just time, it just makes sense from a business standpoint to give those agents that are closing a lot of deals more attention, more help, more guidance in the system so that our data is good, so we can continue to make good decisions.
But they happen to usually not have as much time as the other people to give you.
Yes. Right, but we use these pipelines so that we can make good decisions on where we're spending our marketing dollars, so we know what lead sources close and in what time frames and whatnot. So,
Phil, I think that we're going to wrap up defining your perfect pipeline like a pro. I think you did a great job in helping him. I mean, Phil's our operations guy. Obviously, you can see his passion for delivering us good data, and we just appreciate this opportunity, unless you got anything else in closing, to help them. We'd love any feedback that they have, any suggestions if you think we missed anything. But that's where we're at for today.
Yeah,